Oh, hi, I'm Julia Simpson, the CEO and President of the World Travel and Tourism Council.
Julia, thank you so much for giving Breaking Travel News some time here at the IATA AGM. First of all, a few reflections and perspectives.
Well, it was fantastic hearing Willie Walsh, who is the Secretary General of IATA, giving his vision about aviation. Very, very interesting. It's set to grow, which is good. That tallies with what we think at the WTTC. We can see that travel and tourism is going to be growing at double the rate of global GDP.
And what are the major sort of challenges that we need to overcome collectively as an industry?
Well, you know, it's so interesting. I think, first of all, we need to speak with a really strong single voice because we do have some headwinds. While we're doing very well, if you look at aviation, the margins that they operate at is really, really small. And one of the problems we have is governments around the world don't always help the aviation sector. They tend to layer on taxes, and in addition to that, there was a real promise that governments would support aviation in incentivizing the production of sustainable aviation fuel, and that's not really been happening.
And what do we do about that? How do we get those governments to change their mind, change their policies?
Well, I think the thing is we need them working closely with the oil companies, the actual producers, because a lot of the producers have been concerned, is this going to be a long-term going concern? Should we be investing money in it? But actually they have a kind of duty to do so. There's so much pressure put on the actual airlines, but we have to remember a lot of the efficiencies come from the airframe, the people that Airbus, Boeings, come from the engine manufacturers, and they're not always necessarily in the spotlight. And I know that over the years they've been making much more efficient engines and aircraft, but we need to see more of that, and we need to see governments recognising that airlines do not make the fuel that they put in their engines, so they can make as many rules as they want and regulations about how much SAF needs to be carried, but the quid pro quo of that deal is they need to be working to incentivize the production with oil makers, because it's lots of people are doing this as a startup.
And of course, airlines are part of the overall sort of travel industry's kind of real commitment to driving economic growth. 86.5 million employees in the aviation sector alone. Do we not need to be thinking about the kind of the value that these big industries are kind of having on economic growth?
Yeah, in the travel and tourism sector this year we're going to be employing 370 million people globally. It's a massive number of people at a time when artificial intelligence is going to be moving into our sector, as it will in all sectors, revolutionising it. Undoubtedly jobs will go, but our sector is still an area where we can use a lot of technology, but we will also still be a big employer, and government should be recognising that and applauding that.
We also heard strong words from Mr. Walsh about the aircraft backlog.
Yeah, it really is awful that airlines are having to wait so long. We are actually, sometimes victims to what is a duopoly, and it's difficult because there are hundreds of airlines around the world, but there are only two major wide-body frame manufacturers, and of course we admire them, and of course I think of the engines like Rolls-Royce and GE, but also Airbus and Boeing, these are great companies, but if you are going to be having more or less a duopoly, then you really need to step up and make sure that you can produce things at a pace that can meet demand, because what it means is that the airlines themselves cannot grow because they cannot get their hands on these aircraft.
And here we are in India. It's the first time in more than sort of 4 decades that we're back. Perspectives on that?
Well, Prime Minister Modi is going to be talking to the conference today, which I think is really, really strong signal that he sees India and Indians as being literally on the move. Big, maturing economy, big growing number of middle classes, lots of people travelling. And I think my message would be he's showing great leadership by coming here, great leadership in valuing travel and tourism. There's probably still more that can be done in India, if I'm honest. I think the e-visa process is still a bit clunky, still too much paperwork, even though it calls it itself an e-visa, and also infrastructure. But, you know, I'm not going to be too mean, because I think the fact he's showing great leadership and the economy is doing brilliantly, and the Indigo is hosting this summit. It's a fantastic Indian airline, and also look at what Tata's done with Air India. So this is a very, very positive story here in India.
Well, have a quiet word with him, I'm sure you will. Julia, thank you so much for your time today.
Absolute pleasure as always.